Good evening, everybody. Back again to yet another episode of the Rainmakers, where we give a platform to people who speak about different areas but have been a rainmaker and have created impact in the world around. Today, we are going to talk about story and how important storytelling is. Storytelling is the most powerful way to put us into the world, they say. And the person who's joining, before going into his official introduction, one thing that we all can see wherever he's around is that he's smiling, he's laughing, and then he's making everybody around laugh and smile and have a good time. And it's very rare, very hard to find people like these in these days. And then wherever Enosh is, that is what he creates, and that's fabulous about him, because his introduction is very valuable but not as interesting as what I said before, because it's a long lengthy one, but I have to read it with absolute pride because whatever he has achieved is amazing. So he's a startup storyteller, business and entrepreneurial mentor. He's an entrepreneur with a decade long journey in navigating the digital media and journalism industry, highly networked within the Sri Lankan tech and startup community, impactful in articulating stories for startups, founders, and entrepreneurs through PR and digital media publicity, and working closely with a number of hand-picked organizations and figureheads consulting on media strategies and steering corporate narratives. I know it's long, but not all long introductions have to be wrong or fake. This I know for a fact is absolutely true because the man has made an impact wherever he has gone. Thank you very much, Enosh, for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Yoga and Dona. That's a heavy build-up for a start, man.
That is what we are told to do, but then thank God, everything that we say is not fake, or not, we are not exaggerating the truth. So I think it's easier to do that. And we also are joined by Dona. Dona is the is a success trainer who is approved by Jack Canfield, her mentor, and then she's also a lawyer and a lecturer in law. Thank you very much for joining, Dona, as the co-host.
It's a pleasure as always, Yoga. Thank you very much.
We all know how important storytelling is. They say brands are built on telling stories. And whenever somebody says once upon a time, it's not only the kids, but also all of us who are excited. That brings us a smile, excites us, and we are already interested in listening to what is going to be said. So, Donna, shall we venture into the unknown and ask the master what storytelling is and how we can take it forward and how we all can improve in it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Yoga. And it's not just yesterday that I heard that stories are meant to be creating an impact in the world. And if you want to really make your message impactful, make sure to have a story around it. So there is so much to learn around stories, and there is so much to that we've heard in our lifetime about stories, and especially the most famous brands which are existing today, it's built around stories, just like Yoga said. My first question is, Enosh, how could you describe the importance of storytelling?
Okay, that's a good one. So I would say, see, the very reason that we started is for storytelling. Because I think back in the day when we figured that there is new industry booming, there is a lot of startups coming into the scene, there is a lot of tech initiatives happening, there's a lot of companies, but there was always this struggle of taking what they are doing, like the products and services and the innovation, taking it out to the public, which also has the customers, the clients, the buyers, your end audience. And back then we were seeing that the traditional media was also like kind of lost in trying to carry that message to the audience. So this is when we also realized there is a gap in the market, and there is a real need for storytelling, because there is an entire niche, an entire growing industry, which we need to carry these stories forward to the audience. And that's the reason that we even started this operation. And the importance of story is stories people understand. It's I think it's from a very young age. You reading nursery rhymes to your Enid Blytons to everything. From a very young age, people understand stories. That's why even probably your mom would feed you by telling a story because that works.
Yeah.
They put you to
Of course.
sleep by telling a story. So
Correct.
that's something natural.
Yeah.
It's within human beings to understand stories. They process it much better. Stories
Correct.
give you like a visual narrative of how to imagine, and that sticks to you much better. So storytelling is pretty much part and parcel of our lives, and that's why I think storytelling is important more than trying to write pages and pages of stuff that people don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Absolutely. And also I think stories really connect to us, I suppose. Like whenever there is now, for instance, if it is the brands, you tell about a story where you have failed and then you come up, because like people always do connect with the failures, right? Because it's very relatable, and then immediately you can, like, I suppose, can build the connection. That's what I feel about the stories.
Oh, of course, yeah. So I think failures is definitely part of any journey, and I think people need to embrace failures as well. Because see, even if you read a storybook, right, it needs to have that flow. It needs to have the ups and the downs. If you just read something, or you listen to a story, which is always like it's completely positive, everything is going good. Probably the value of that story wouldn't like it wouldn't like strike you enough. It wouldn't be
Yeah.
memorable. So when a story is like authentic, and it has its ups and downs, it has the winning moments, the failures, and everything. When it incorporates everything, that becomes a good story. I think
Yeah.
even for us, um, one of the reasons that we came to a juncture to even start Articulate is where we back in 2019 we kind of traveled in the region, where we went to Malaysia, Singapore, and Cambodia, and met people who are making changes in the ecosystem, the startup ecosystem, and that's when we realized that Sri Lanka is not even in the map, so to
Oh,
speak. Like
Yeah.
this is already a niche, but there is a lot happening within startup and tech ecosystem. But when you travel outside, you realize that when you're here, you see there's so much happening. But when you go out, there is even bigger things happening. So comparatively, it's like um, what we are doing is almost unheard of.
yeah.
So once you travel outside, I think that's also true. Like when you travel, when you get exposed to people outside, you get to have a better perspective.
Yeah.
And then when we came back, we realized, oh my God, there's so much happening outside. What are we doing? And we realized that our mission needs to be taking all these amazing stories that are happening here. We need to take it out, because we've been narrating the same stories within the same audience. We've been narrating the stories within the island, but we kind of felt that's not enough, because what we need to do is all the amazing things that are happening here. We need to take it out to the region, because that will create bigger impacts, multiplied impacts. That will create connections. That will create much more economic impact as well. And that's the reason that we even started. We traveled out, got to see things. We came back and changed our entire strategy. Changed our, came back to the drawing board, and now we have Articulate Asia, and our mission is to take the stories out to the region.
Wow. Beautiful, amazing. I think there is one question that I really want to ask, but I think that I would ask after yoga's question.
Sure. Amazing, amazing journey, metaphorically and literally, I guess. Thank God for that journey to Cambodia and Malaysia and all of these countries that gave you that idea to represent a niche that is very important, that could be hopefully the future of Sri Lanka and could take the startups of Sri Lanka to the world, and many more people, young and ambitious, will follow this niche and take our country to the future. Beautiful. Um, Enosh, I think the next thing that we should then, if we have established how important storytelling is what are some tips to tell meaningful and memorable stories?
Okay, that's interesting too. So I think you need to be pretty much you need to be authentic for telling stories because actually speaking, there is no secret formula for stories. It's nothing like you need to do like a degree or masters in storytelling. I think the more authentic you are, the more real you are, you could tell better stories. It's just that
Right.
when you try to make it too complex and you try to put too much of words that normal people wouldn't understand, you
Yeah.
tend to think that you're being clever, but you're
Yeah.
not being clear. So clear versus clever, you need to always be clear. So you need to figure
Right.
out, can you write a simple message, a simple story which even your grandma would understand, or let's say a 12-year-old kid would understand? That
Correct.
is a good story. And I think in this fast-paced world right now specifically, people do not have time, so that time is another luxury. So when you're also competing to get attention span, I think the most simplest message immediately gets better attention than you trying to craft this wonderfully worded 1,200 page article
Correct.
versus
Correct.
something that immediately catches your attention, like like a one liner, or maybe a meme, or something so simple can it's like pictures speak 1,000 words. It's almost true, like something that immediately grasps something so wonderful. If you can just put it into a few lines, that's much better than trying to come up with case studies and theses and all these fancy things.
Correct.
So I think it's not complex. It's I think it's people try to make it
Clarity.
complex.
So
uh,
what Enosh, your first point is to be as clear as possible.
of course, yeah, as clear as
There is no
possible.
like, don't sacrifice clarity for the sake of being appearing clever.
Exactly,
Focus
yeah,
on clarity. Fabulous.
exactly.
Fabulous. Okay, Josh.
And
Anything else
even,
to add on that?
oh yeah, I think even being, let's say, in terms of the question itself, like being authentic, is like there are so many friends in the startup scene that within our network, there are so many friends that I know who are founders of companies, who have built companies, who are within the ecosystem, who are change makers. Most of these people, if you follow them on social media, they themselves, they live the story, which means they narrate their life as it is, which
Yeah.
means it's sometimes you might see a drastic difference between a so-called social media influencer versus somebody who's being extremely real. Because sometimes you see only a glamorous side of say an Instagram influencer, because the pictures look beautiful, everything is marvelously edited. You see the birds flying in the perfect formation, the grasses are green, the sky is blue, there's
Yeah.
always a rainbow in the background, things like that. uh,
I haven't seen enough rainbows in my life, but every time I see one of those, there is a rainbow. Don't
oh,
know from
definitely. Oh
where.
yeah, yeah.
Yes,
And a recent example is you get to see African elephants in Sri Lankan jungles.
exactly.
Yeah. So it tends to be marvelous on one side, but that's not always authentic, because
Yes,
some like that example that I told you, you just miss one thing, people get to know that your entire life has been a fake,
correct.
opposed to people who just put it out as it is. Sometimes being that extremely authentic, being that open and transparent, that becomes a better narrative. That in itself becomes like people become influencers just because they are being authentic. And I know many friends like this within our startup ecosystem. If you just follow them, there is no bullshit. You just get things as it is.
Yeah,
They speak their minds out. They tell what happens within their startup journeys, their personal lives. Not too much in terms of like when there is hardships, specifically during let's say
yeah,
COVID time. People who were like going through hardships and difficulties, they were giving more of See, a good thing about the startup communities, it's a positive bunch, right? No wonder they all went out to taking massive risks. So they also like to share, like share learnings of how do you overcome these kind of periods, what you could do, where you can get help, and things like that. They share, I think, for a bigger purpose. They don't just share it to kind of showcase that they're doing all right. It's more like they're sharing to make sure that as a community we all benefit by following or learning with the life paths that they are going through. And I think that is all that is there for authenticity. It's nothing that we need to learn and do. It's just that if we are extremely transparent, if we just be clear, that's more than enough.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Beautiful. I really liked how you emphasize so much on the authenticity, Enosh, because I've personally seen that there are people who really destroy their brand because of fake stories. I mean, they have so much to offer, yet their story becomes fake. And as a result, people really feel that fakeness, and then they fail to carry out the message that they really want to put out there, because everyone emphasizes. I don't know whether it's also something which a wrong message being carried out to the society, that you should really have a story, because then people start creating fake stories for themselves even when they don't have a story. So maybe yes, the tip that you gave in terms of authenticity is quite very important to be emphasized on.
Of course, I mean, you should not get trapped into manufacturing stories. You need to come out with what you really are, who you really are. Because if you take any company, any startup, or any person, everybody has their unique journey. It's just that how you bring it out. I think when you try to manufacture a story, it's almost like a quick fix. A best example I could give is like something like there was some time back there was this ab belts that you can put the belt and within 30 minutes a day, and 1 month later you lose like 10 kilos. But that's like a quick fix.
I'm not going to comment on this.
Probably used it, I guess.
I'm sure Yoga has tried this out.
People have suggested that to me, and after about a month or so, when the honeymoon period was over, they themselves were saying it didn't work out. So thank God I waited, resisted my urge to use it, but then yeah.
Of course,
So it's a beautiful story that never worked. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think it's more like you might think that quick fixes will work. So even let's say you're trying to do out a story, you come up with this amazing narrative, you put out in the papers, you put it on your corporate blog and everything. It looks nice, but it's like it's only short lived, because you're not building on a strong foundation, which is like this within that same example. It's like you're actually going out to do your your morning routines of your daily exercises. You do it day by day. You put in your hours and you do it slowly. You might not see the results overnight. You might not see it within a month. But let's say 2 years, 3 years down the line, you would see massive changes, where even if you wanted to, you wouldn't be able to break it overnight, because a good story, a transparent and authentic story is it builds so much of credibility over time. So it probably can be harder, even if random people try to mudsling, it's not gonna overnight evaporate. But again, there is another theory to it, like it's easier to break credibility faster than building it. So when you build a good story, when you have good credibility, you need to also make sure and put a lot of effort and maintain it. You should not do anything stupid after that, because empires can come crumbling down if you start acting stupid. And I think we have local examples too. People who have built great companies, corporates who have had a long history of credibility, but 10 years, 20 years down the line, something goes wrong, or people act in a certain way, or made some bad decisions because of the power of social media, and because everyone has access to put in their 2 cents. It can damage, create a lot of damage. So Yeah.
And also, I think another point that I was just thinking, um, because that we're talking about storytelling and what should really be there, how to tell a good story. Um, Sometimes I feel like when there is one person acting for a brand and the story that they create is could be like completely around themselves, that it will show that they're so full of themselves, so the story is like completely based around them. Like, how can we avoid this, Enosh? Because if of course, I mean, you would put in a lot of effort to build your brand, but then that does not mean the story that you are bringing out to the world should really necessarily be around you, because it will seem like, okay, you're trying to just promote yourself. How do we draw the right balance there?
That's also very, very interesting. So how you look at this, I think specifically when you look at it from a startup perspective, I think everybody who sets out to do something new, it's extremely challenging because you're trying to come up with an extremely new solution to maybe a problem which is existing, or probably a problem which even the people don't know yet, and you're coming up with something new. So trying to build credibility for that is one of the most challenging in terms of a new startup or a new product or service. So usually the easier way to get there is if you have your personal credibility, if you have good credibility as a person, you could leverage on that to take your startup story out. It's not again, it's like you don't do that. You need to have a good balance. So you should not make sure that you're riding the company's name and credibility on top of you, or you're not riding on top of the company's name and credibility. So you need to make sure that there is a good balance. But usually I think personal credibility has a lot of leverage and has a lot of power. So you need to make sure that you use it for the right reasons, and take the message out to your networks and to the people. And that's probably a healthy way to start taking a message out, because when you're trying to bring something out to the world, I think you need to be the first champion of what you're preaching. You need to be the first person who got convinced for that. So if you yourself don't live up for it, you don't stand up for it, nobody else would. You can't expect a client or a customer to expect for them to give you monies in dollars or millions just because you had a good story where even you don't talk about it.
Correct.
So
Correct.
so
If you don't believe
that's
in
what
it, who will believe in it?
exactly. So I think that's why you see most of the some of the the celebrity CEOs that we know, like from Steve Jobs to Zuckerberg to Elon, some of the known names I'm telling, who stand up for their own brand. I mean, you tell the name, you know what the brand is. You tell the brand, you know who's the immediate face that comes to mind is these people, because they are the brand, or the brand is them, and they are like the first people to be in front. Who gets attacked first is them, but who also champions it first is them.
Correct.
So you need to be that, because you're as startups, I think your initial team, or the founder or the co-founder, you have to be the champions of your startup or your product, and you need to be out there. It also makes you vulnerable if you're not adding value to what you're doing. But yeah,
And
that's how
also,
you.
I'm sure it's also when you don't live up to what you tell the company's corporate story to be is what it stands for, isn't it?
Of course, of
That's
course.
the risk.
See, on the flip side, it takes a lot of guts to be out
Yeah.
there, because see, if you build a corporate narrative or a startup
Correct.
narrative which has loopholes, let's say like Dona, like you said, you come up with stories which doesn't live up to what you're actually doing, or like I explained earlier, let's say you manufacture stories. Now
Correct.
putting your name out, or people in the founding team or the co-founding team or startups, them putting their name out, now is going to be risky. So
Correct.
on the flip side, I think it works in two ways. If people are willing to, I mean, if people are championing what they're doing, their courses or their startup, their products and services, it also indirectly shows that they are very confident of what they're doing, and they are not
Correct.
afraid. versus people where, some companies you just see, only the name boards and the websites, but you don't know who's running it. It's
Correct.
sometimes also fishy because, maybe the people are hiding behind it. They're just hiding behind
Correct.
a corporate veil, and
Yeah.
you never know. You don't even know sometimes whether it's a shell company.
Correct. Correct. Run by somebody we really hate.
Yes,
Yeah.
can be that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Very good answer.
Well, my next question is, as you were talking about Articulate Asia, you were telling like how you were able to go around the region, and then you saw that the stories here must be taken to the region, and people must be aware about it. So this was, I suppose, one of the reasons why you formed Articulate Asia. So like that, I mean, Simon Sinek introduced this golden circle where he said, "Start with why and don't focus on how or what." What do you think is the importance of purpose in a story, in
Oh,
storytelling?
I think purpose is everything. I think not only for storytelling, I think life as a whole, purpose is what really matters. So for me, I think Simon Sinek is, great respect to the man, but I'm yet to read that book. It's in my list. I think Big Bad Wolf just happened. So I think the last 3 years
Yeah.
I've been stockpiling books, and, I'm just only like, my cupboard is expanding. But
Yeah,
We are building a library without actually reading one.
Oh yeah,
correct.
I'm sure. I'm sure next year I can have Big Bad Wolf. They don't even need to come. You can come my house, and you can get all the book hauls you need. But yeah, I'm yet to read that book. But then again, I think that's really true, because you need to start with why, because the purpose is always what matters. And sometimes when you look at the purpose, I think those stories also stand out really well. And when it comes to, having memory, or, something that, really captures you, is because of the purpose. I think a good example is one of my friends who are doing a startup called Pink Drives. And the reason why they even came up with this is because the purpose was for safe traveling for women. And the reason, again, even from a story angle, there is a story behind it, how he arrived at that, where, there
Yeah.
was like a backstory of, there was like a real need. One of his friends passed away, and, the family needed support, and, there was like a vehicle that could be used. And then just to figure out, how to make use of a vehicle, and also create something sustainable. How this app came into be, and
Yeah.
how that became into, like, lots of people saw this, and they also started wanting the same thing. People like wanted to get into this platform, because I
Yeah.
think lots of women who were probably at home, or who didn't,
Yeah.
or who wanted an extra income, they saw this as an opportunity, and now it
Correct.
has actually become like a startup. So I think that
Correct.
why really matters. And for
Yeah.
something like this, you don't have to go out and manufacture a story. I mean, this story itself is so powerful that, you just narrate this story. That's perfect. I think people will be convinced. And you don't have to, come up with, fancy words, and, add on narratives, because, those might not work, and
Correct.
it won't serve any purpose in the long run.
Correct. Correct.
And people, let's say, even some of my other friends within the startup industry, like, I know another founder, startup company from Vaunia. And I'm still there, right? It's a bit of a connection issue. I'm
Yes,
still there.
of
Perfect,
course.
Okay,
Enosh.
all right.
Go ahead. That's great. Yeah.
Okay. So there is another friend of mine who's from Vaunia, and, started a SEO related company. So probably, I think, one might argue, saying, everybody does this. Like, there's so many companies out there who's providing the same service, but, the story in itself has so much of value, because
Right.
sometimes it's about why you're doing it, that people come to you. Sometimes you
Correct.
might provide the exact same service, but, who provides it, why do you provide it, that purpose in itself will draw more business to you, more people to attract you. And that's why I think purpose really matters. And when you have a purpose, it also makes what you're doing sustain, because there is no end point to it, because your purpose will always be there, and you would figure out more and better ways how to serve for that purpose. Because if it's just only an end goal, let's say there's a corporate and there is only an end goal and there is no purpose, you probably would find yourself always lost, having to come up with a new targets and KPIs of what you need to achieve. Whereas a purpose is like it's almost like never ending. You can keep strive for it. It's like your vision statement. So that's why I think purpose is very important.
Yeah, amazing. I think amazing examples you brought in, and definitely, like, I'm sure it would give some idea to the viewers, like, why there definitely has to be like a purpose behind a story, behind their brand, and especially like all these examples are quite amazing, and they're from Sri Lanka, right? So, which makes it like even more special. Thank you, Enosh,
Shohan and
for
Pink Tribes are very close to us too. It's a business that has made an impact, and thank you for bringing up that example. Amazing.
yeah, Yoga. Over to you.
I also like the example, thank you, Dona, about the SEO company. We have how many SEO companies in Sri Lanka? Thousands and thousands and thousands. So how do you make an impact through purpose? Why do you stand for? Why are you there? And what makes you different? And why you are the person that we should come and get the service from? Isn't it amazing? Beautiful answer. I loved it. Now I'm sure you have met people who have great stories like the ones that you shared. What are some stories that you felt? What are some organization, maybe without naming them, like they had a great product, great service, they were backed by great people, but unfortunately they were not great storytellers and they did not achieve what the potential that they could have achieved. I'm sure, since stories are so important, this is the truth somebody would have faced in their lifetime. Do you have some stories, some examples like that?
I have, so I can't name. So there are definitely stories like that, which is why I think
Right.
you come back to if you have the purpose figured out, I think it's easier, because I think the people who struggle to
Correct.
who tend to have a great company or a great product or a service, but they are struggling to tell stories. I think it's because probably they are lacking the purpose. Because I think eventually, if you
Correct.
figure out why you're doing it, whether you're good at storytelling or not,
Yeah.
I think people would understand you. I know people who are not good with
Correct.
a certain language, or who are not great with words, probably who don't even appear as much in public as they should, but they
Yeah.
have some amazing
Mm.
companies. Is because once you have purpose, and once you are filling a need in the market, the story carries for itself. And that's why I think authenticity always matters. It's not that that you need to have a great story because you're and that's what will eventually lead you to success. But on the other hand, I would also say that if for example, let's say you're good at storytelling, that let's say you're good at storytelling, but you're lagging behind in your product or service, that is also not good. So for example, I think some of our local telcos, I think when you look at their marketing advertisements and in the adverts, you see like super fast internet, and things like things are bursting out of your TV screen.
I will give you a relatable. I'm so happy. I'm so happy that you brought it up. And they say they have 90% fast internet, and here I am sitting just 20 kilometers away from the Colombo city, and my internet is absolutely bad.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And I'm
So
so grateful for you. Yeah, for bringing that up. Exactly. Perfect.
so I mean that's what it is. So let's say if you have great stories like that, you need to even live up to it. So say sometimes the companies are too big that we don't have any other options, and we still stick around with it. But not always the case for startups. You put out something grand, and you have all of these promises laid out, and then you don't live up to your promises, I mean, that's like, you're digging your own grave. So both are bad. I think what I would say is, if you have purpose, eventually you could, I mean, the stories would eventually, build up for itself, and you could narrate it out. Again, I'm just generalizing a lot of things, because I think from a general
Because we can't
perspective,
mention
this works. Not only that, in terms of, let's say, storytelling also matters. So I think there are also the unfortunate case of, people who are like really passionate and who have a purpose, but sometimes they might struggle with reaching out to the right channels and right way of storytelling, and they might lose. So that is also there. But then again, what I'm saying is, on a general perspective, I think it works in both ways, which means, if you have purpose, I think things will eventually fall into place, because I think what really matters there is, your determination. So people who eventually fall out, maybe they just gave up early, and not necessarily that, they are probably, I think because they lack of determination, that's what I would say. So because if you really have purpose and passion, I think you will eventually figure out a way. Even if you're not good at storytelling, I think you can get people who are good at storytelling for your
That's beautiful.
startup,
Beautiful.
for your startup, or
I
your
have
company.
one more questions to add to that, Enosh. So we've spoken about how authentic we should be, how we should invest on being clear, and how even at the expense of short-term gains, we have to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Even if it is not going to be exaggeration, is only going to kill us. That we have discussed that. But the element that is very difficult is for us to convince somebody to do that, right? Whether it's a chief executive officer who has to convey this idea to the board, or whether somebody to convince their stakeholders, or a startup owner to tell the that this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be authentic, even at the expense of me going to be not doing great at in the short run. How would you say that we could convince? What is that you would say?
That's a very I would say I mean, I had to have a give you like a nuanced answer for that. So it's like, if your sole purpose is convincing someone, I think you could do it either way, by good storytelling skills.
Yeah.
But it's like, let's say, when you say, like, when you mentioned, like, it's your CFO or CEO or whoever, like,
Right.
again, I think eventually it falls back to authenticity, because like a true
Correct.
message, if it's authentic, even if you stumble with your words, even if you stumble with the right way to put it out, if you're being transparent, I think people would eventually understand you. You might not be effective at that very moment, but I think it still trumps anything than trying to win the battle by telling a great story. Because again, I think it'll go back to like that short fixes. So especially like
Exactly, Enosh. So if I am faced with this situation where I want to tell an authentic story, and if I would, let's say, I'm going to tell, if my answer to that is to say that even at the loss of short-term gains, we will gain in the long term. So by losing all the battles, we will win in the long run. Would that work? What do you think?
Again, I would say it's being clear, right? If you, even
Right.
if you're trying to be let's say you wanna narrate a convincing story, and you need to get people, you need to win people. I think
Right.
being clear, once you know what you need to do, once you know what's what your authenticity is, you just need to be clear. Because trying
Okay.
to put a lot of fluff around it, and making, again, complicated messages also will drive away from what your real purpose is. So I think
Very true.
more than even, I think, from your example, I think even looking at from an external perspective, even taking the stories out, I think clarity always wins than
Yeah.
complexity. And that's what we
Correct.
even do with Articulate. I think every startup that we work with, every founder and corporate that we work with, we first listen to the stories, and you won't believe, I think, sometimes when the companies are narrating the stories to us, even it looks even complex to us, even we don't understand. So we have to like cross question and ask so many cross questions to figure out, okay,
Understand.
understand. So and the whole whole value proposition that we bring in is, we get all of that context, and then we simplify it to, the bare minimum, like, the bare bones of, what exactly it is. I think if you look at some of the statements, like, what companies stand for, like, Google and Microsoft, you can just put it in a few words. Like, Google is all about, organizing the world's information. I mean, how much more simple can you make it put? I think even Microsoft is like, their initial, their purpose was to put a computer on every desk. And Disney, I think, had something like, to entertain everyone. So these are like some of the most simplest, which like, anybody would understand. But, sometimes even within the corporate, within your boardrooms, I think if you try to explain, like, Microsoft or, Disney, you can do that, you in a half an hour pitch deck with, all these, fancy jargons. So it's up to you to pick which works best.
Simplicity. Correct. Amazing. Beautiful examples, beautiful examples.
Yeah. So I'll just make it very quick. So I think we are coming into the last 20 minutes of our podcast, and we have.
I didn't realize.
Yeah, I know.
It play like just like
at all.
Amazing.
Because it was very interesting, and so something that I've seen is that the best corporate stories which are told are built around, or it addresses emotions of people. Can you give us a little bit of examples about how successful, like this, relating the emotions into stories can be?
Again, I think, emotions trump everything, because, I think simplicity in, capturing an audience is, that storytelling, and, the storytelling, what it does is captures emotions. So it's like, you boil it down to emotions, and that's the reason why we are even telling stories, because stories immediately hit your emotions. I think even when you look at it on a visual perspective, I think, I remember this McDonald's ad, back in the day when I was like really young. I saw, when McDonald's was launching here, they put all of these, these burgers and, all of these things falling. I mean, that just immediately, grabs your emotions. They don't talk about, it doesn't talk about any of the details. It's just like a visual imagery of, all of these, ingredients is falling on the screen. And that speaks to you. And I think that's what even, I think yoga, like, you mentioned earlier, like, what Coca-Cola does. It speaks to the emotion. Even local companies, I think, some of the examples that you can take is like, Albert Uncle's advertisement. I don't know whether you remember that.
Yes.
Albert Uncle. So yes. I sometimes even forget what the advertisement, what the product was. But, we all remember Albert Uncle.
Yeah.
And it's because it
Enosh, I think you got it because you were watching it latter part of the advertisement cycle. I watched it at the peak because every time we turned around, that advertisement was running. It was by a very famous bank for Western Union money transfer.
Oh yes, Western Union money transfer, of course, yeah. So again, I think the message is also clear, and why is because why we remember that is because it's immediately capturing an emotion. I think anybody could be in that situation, and whatever that advertisement played out, anybody could have gone through that exact same scenario, and that's what probably they would have done, and that immediately, like, struck with people. And that's like, even after 20, 30 years, we're still talking about it. I think another example would be the coil advertisement. That dude walking on the corridor, whistling the 10-number coil.
Yeah. Beautiful examples.
I think that's why you need to make sure that, you need to make sure that your stories are, again, revolving back to, like, why it needs to be authentic. And then, authenticity really, strikes your emotions, and, that would have, have a better impact on your memory, and, you will create kind of a relationship with, whatever it is, like, the product or service or the brand name. And that's how I think stories are built, with emotions.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Beautiful.
Yoga?
Yeah. Enosh, from taking from emotion emotions. Uh, it's beautiful, the examples that you share. The simple idea is that we saw these videos how many years back, and now still we can remember it. That is the impact that was created. That's very true that emotions are important. Also, now, when you ask anybody what you do, what does company stand for, or look at an advertisement or marketing pitch or an elevator pitch, what they're going to say is give us these facts, right? Fact after fact after fact after, like, we do, this is what we, how we do it, this is our top line, this is our bottom line, this is what our products and services are recognized, these are the awards we have won. But unfortunately, facts don't persuade, stories do. Yeah, what would you agree, and what is your perspective?
I mean, I can give you a good example. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Imagine, let's say, Dona, someone came to propose you, and one person is saying, "Hi, I have a 6-figure salary. I weigh 70 kilos. I have 2 houses. I have 2 cars, and I live in Dehiwala." Versus somebody's coming and saying, "Dona, I'll go to the moon and come back for you." which do you think is much more convincing? Which do you go for? So
Well,
if you're answering that, definitely I would want to know.
Nice. Let's go
So
for
this-
it.
So
well, in this situation, of course, I would definitely go for the first guy because I would really want his
My
story live.
goodness.
I think the
Yeah.
economic conditions are such that we have to pick otherwise.
Yeah, but if the second guy made a credible story, I'm pretty sure, yes, I would have got convinced more than the guy who was like, trying to show off.
Oh, definitely. So I think eventually what happens is, let's say, this also, I think it's a good example because, see, you cannot ignore facts. So which means, let's say both had 2 houses, 2 cars, and they both had 6-figure salaries. Now, if you ask the same question, which would you pick? You probably, I think you can answer this again. Now, which would you pick?
Enosh, can you come again? I think there was a network lag. I'm really sorry.
Oh, sorry. So I mean, like, if you come back to that same question, like, imagine now both had 2 houses, 2 cars, and 2 6-figure salaries in dollars, let's say. Now, who would you pick?
So, of course, the one with the story, definitely.
So, yeah,
Because
I think
I'm sure the
Yeah.
thing is, the stories would really appeal to your emotions, right? I mean, and especially, I don't know, I'm a very emotional person, and yes, the story would really, really win the game.
definitely. I think there is a lot of, I think, even if you look at most of the products that we buy, most of the brands, if you look at it, I think sometimes we even stick to certain brands is not because it's like superior than the other. Yes, there is sometimes certain things, but we associate certain values because of the stories associated with it, and that's why I think we also tend to stick to brands. And then definitely, if you look at your lives, most of the things that you're using, like from the phone you use to the car you drive to the shoes you buy, all of that, probably I think if you actually strip it down and look at it, probably everything is almost similar. It's the same materials. It's probably it's the same thing, maybe with minor differences, but
Yeah.
but we sometimes give like disproportionate amount of value for one over the other, not for the minor differences in material, but because of the entire story that's built around it. So that's why stories matter, and that's why I think brands also give a lot of importance to stories. And I think one of the good examples is Nike. Nike always they don't come out with facts. I mean, they don't always talk about about the facts of what the shoe is. Most of the advertising is always about emotion. If you just go to YouTube, just type Nike, I mean, every single advertisement is like, it leaves you like, dumbstruck, like, wow.
Correct.
Sorry, awestruck.
Yeah.
So it's like, wow, I think even one of the recent advertisements that they did, like, it was like, editing genius, how they brought that together. I don't know whether you saw that ad. It was just amazing. But still,
Yeah.
that video, it had like, it evoked so much of emotions. And that's why I think emotions and, storytelling matters a lot to the brand. And it's not that we should ignore facts, because again, it drives back to authenticity. You cannot fake, you cannot, completely ignore figures as well.
Facts.
Facts and figures. I think even what we do, even when we narrate stories, is we build the story upon facts. So which means we don't narrate every single fact, but because that sometimes gets complicated. But the story is built on top of facts. So which means anybody would understand a story. And you don't necessarily need to go into minor detail of every single fact. But over time, when every story is credible and it's all built on facts, people would understand. That's where the brand credibility comes on board. And then after that, once you build that, anything that the brand says, everybody would believe. They would just blindly believe. That trust should never be shaken, and never should it be exploited.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
I think beautifully illustrated, like the importance of like stories. And I mean, of course, you very well stated that facts are important, but then stories play a better game in persuading like people and then speaking to their emotions and then better convincing. So my next question is, like the moment you say tech, for many of us, we really don't understand it. So how can the stories be told to get rid of this fear, to reduce this fear?
What's the fear you have?
Well, I think it's very complicating, and we don't really understand it. The moment you say tech companies or like startups or like things of that notion. So I just want to know how can stories be told to get rid of this?
I think that's a bad job of the tech companies, trying to complicate everything. So now everyone is kind of it's fearful about tech. So I think reality is like even I'm not a techie myself. I'm more of a what do you say? More of a marketer. So and I think that also makes it much more easier for me, because I tend to look at the simple facts when I look at stories. And for me, what I understand is, if it's in plain English, if I could read and if I could understand, that's what I probably sticks in my brain. So, and that also makes it easier when I think most of the writers that we have, they're also not techies. They understand tech, but they are not like hardcore techies, so that they are able to absorb information and then put it out in a different way where anybody would understand. And that's the purpose. I think when it comes to tech and startups, I think there is so much of amazing things happening there. And it's all a matter of all of them are trying to solve some problem. They have like a solution for that. But when you try to harp too much on the solution itself, let's say, or the tech behind the solution, that's when things become complicated. And then it might not even serve the purpose of why you even have to narrate that story. Because if you harp more about the technology, you're not talking about what you're actually solving. Rather than you actually talk about what you're solving, what's the problem, what you're solving, how you're creating value to people. Amazing. That's what it matters. So I think if everyone does that, you wouldn't even have this fear towards technology. And I think a good example is Apple, because people just go to Apple because the moment when we say Apple, it's like people think it's okay, it's friendly, easy to use, even your grandpa could use it. Whereas the moment you say any other brands operating systems, you feel like, okay, you need to be like a genius to use that. And I think I was, for a very long time, I was using Android, and I even switched over to Apple. Is not because I didn't want to use it. After time, you feel like, okay, this is complicated. You need to spend time to do this. Whereas a different, it's the same product. It serves the same purpose, but one is like, it invites you to use. I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this.
Exactly.
I completely agree with you.
Yeah. So I think one is is not complicated. You can definitely say it's for the dummies. But yeah, I feel like people who like to be dummies and don't want to spend too much time. If I think the purpose is if you just need to call people or do some basic stuff on the phone, I think if it serves your purpose, I think you would always go for convenience. Why do you need to make your life miserable just because you can put you can change your operating system with multiple wallpapers and dark mode, white light mode, and all of that. I think most of this was not even in Apple for a longer period of time. Now only they're coming up with these features. But yeah, so I think even we set out to do the same thing. When we started, I think when we saw the gap that tech is being extremely complex, or maybe on one side, I think at the very early stages, when we saw how the traditional media was narrating tech, they were not even addressing tech in the first place. Let's say like a tech event happens, or let's say there's a new innovation, a new product or service out there. They usually go for this, these launching ceremonies or award ceremonies, and they talk about, okay, who were the chief guests and what was served for breakfast, or who lit the oil lamp. But they never talk about the product or the service and what it solves. So that's when we also saw that there is a gap. We need to tell better stories. We need to bring these stories out, and that's how we set out to get into this industry and start narrating stories. So yeah, I think the day you say that tech is not fearful, it's not intimidating, that's when we have done our work.
Yes, absolutely. I think you very well answered that question, Enosh. I think we are coming to the last 3 minutes, Yoga. Can we do it? The last question.
What's the last question?
Is Yoga there? All right. So till Yoga joins back.
We will quickly catch up with some of the comments that come.
Sure.
Chase is saying, so, and Jarada was saying storytelling works for anything, anywhere, anytime, even to explain complicated matter like accounting professional who works as a partner at a very top firm. Yes, it's a very powerful tool which many are not capitalizing. Thank you very much for the topic and the discussion, he says. Amazing. And also, Sandrine John Gomez says storytelling has a linkage to our childhood too, which we discussed, and it has attention-grabbing tool even in public speaking. Opening someone's heart is the stepping stone for the rest of the work. So storytelling stands to be effective in that sense, he thinks. Amazing. I think we all agree. So beautifully done. I have to also reveal behind the scene truth that nobody will tell you if not for what I'm going to say. I'm going to leave Dona to have the concluding remarks, but then this I have to say, that is, we definitely sent Enosh a few questions to answer, but what he answered to the majority of the questions he faced during this conversation was the back and forth and the question that we were asking out of script. But then he, like a champion, he handled everything very well, and because of his experience and knowledge, I think it showed how well he handled it. Beautiful, Enosh. We know that we put you in trouble by asking questions that were absolutely out of a script, but I think that added a lot of value. And as you repeatedly said, authenticity of a person and or what he says and what they stand for is very important. And what you did here today by talking to us for about an hour now and sharing this very valuable information is absolutely valuable. Thank you very much for joining and enlightening us. And I'm sure I wish you the very best for taking this journey forward and your team. And congratulate Asia, a very successful year and decade ahead in making a difference in the lives of many entrepreneurs and startups and the country as a whole. Wish you the best. Thank you very
Oh,
much for
thank you.
joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for both of you. Thank you so much for taking your time. And, I really enjoyed this. I think definitely there were some tough questions. but thank you so much, guys. I think I enjoyed it really well. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure to have you, Enosh. I mean, although I've been like, this is more like a conversation that I started today. Like, it never felt like that. It never felt weird. I mean, I think we were able to connect at the same level. So I really loved and enjoyed the conversation. I think we were talking about something which we were equally passionate about, and which also can be like very useful to anyone who is watching us. So and although like we were throwing abrupt questions at you, I think you handled it like a champion, as Yoga said, and it's such a great pleasure. And we hope to have you back again with our podcast, maybe
For sure.
in the near future. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your expertise, for sharing it with the viewers.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We will meet you again on a different podcast next week. Thank you. Take
Definitely.
care.
See you guys. Bye.
See
Bye.
you.